Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. People today have many questions about God. In fact, there are so many questions about God that many people have given up belief in God altogether. The questions are so deep and so fundamental that they simply jettison the concept entirely. Modern science has certainly contributed greatly to this lack of belief, but it is not the only factor. There are all kinds of other motivators from both intellectual and emotional vantage points. If one is not inclined to believe in God to begin with, they don't have to look all that far to find support for their atheism. One particular angle that really drives people in this direction is the notion of divine justice. This idea is firmly embedded in biblical thought, and all monotheistic religions have bought into it hook, line, and sinker. There is no getting around the basic belief that God runs the world in a just and fair manner if one wishes to be a card-carrying member of either Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. Of course, the details about how that divine system works differ from religion to religion. The fact is that even within one religion, there isn't necessarily universal agreement on such an important idea. These details include such crucial matters as how God deals with evil in the world. This isn't the only such detail, but it certainly is a major one, and the one that sends people off the deep end of theistic belief. The flip side of this question, how God rewards those who are good, is equally perplexing and vague. God, of course, should reward good deeds in some manner that seems to fit reality. But all too often, those who do such deeds find themselves wondering why they aren't being rewarded adequately. They might not have this problem when it comes to others, but when they look in that proverbial mirror, they do. It is difficult to avoid feeling bitter about a perceived lack of fairness in the program. This is such a common feeling that it is almost like an undercurrent of life. We all feel this sense of divine betrayal at one point or another in life. Even atheists have trouble avoiding it as they stew and brew over the obvious unfairness in things. They may not believe in a deity who does the rewarding and the punishing, but they still feel very strongly that somebody or something should be handling the matter better than the haphazard system we call life. This question, the rewarding of good and the punishing of evil, has been with us since the earliest recorded writings that went beyond simple marks on a stone. From the time that human beings have been able to express their thoughts in coherent sentences worked out enough to want to preserve in some permanent form, this question has been there. At one point, it was a question that involved multiple deities. Perhaps each one handled a different aspect of the system, so it wasn't necessarily so surprising if glitches occurred. This god might be ready to reward some good deed, but another god might have had something else in mind, and things went awry. When monotheism took over much of the world, things got a little stickier. There was only one deity to handle everything, so it wasn't so easy to blame a perceived injustice on some other deity. Of course, there was always the devil or the Satan to cover that entire side of life, so things could be understood in some manner. But the question on this was always how an independent source of evil could really exist in the all-powerful and all-everything reality of God. So this belief only kicked the proverbial can down the road. If one doesn't buy into this idea of Satan as a kind of evil parallel to God, the notion of divine justice or theodicy becomes a huge problem of belief. This week's parsha is called Ha'azinu. That word means something like listen, but in a very poetic sense. In fact, almost the entire parsha is one long poem. There is no other parsha in the Torah quite like this. There are other poems here and there, some about as long as this one, but never do they take up most of a parsha. Needless to say, the parsha is rather short. It totals 52 verses in all. Not the shortest parsha, but pretty close to it. But with those verses, 43 of which are this poem, there is much to be found. It is not very easy to read and even more difficult to understand. There are introductions and metaphors and quite confusing theology. There is a lot of harsh rebuke and a certain amount of encouraging promises. It doesn't begin or end on a particularly happy note, but neither is it particularly sad. It simply tells things as they are. If one were to look for a common theme of the poem, it would probably be that of divine justice. This is somewhat debatable, as many other ideas are broached in these verses. Nevertheless, this idea seems to be there, either front and center or somewhere in the background throughout the entire poem. The poem doesn't lay out any philosophical arguments one way or the other to answer the many questions on divine justice. It simply states the ideas like instructions on a user manual of some gadget and expects us to go along with them. Mixed in with that theme are many sub-themes. There is a very brief overview of history as it concerned the Israelites. There is the idea of God dividing up the various peoples of the world into nations with borders. There is the complementary idea of the Israelites being a somewhat unique nation that was in some way set aside as God's portion. The Israelites were specially guided to their fate as God's people. No other divine power, whatever they may have been, was to have any control over them. Then it moves into the troubling history of the Israelites themselves, how they rebelled against God and did not go along with the strict guidelines of biblical monotheism. The result of their ignoring God was that God would ignore them. This would then result in their being subject to all kinds of evils and suffering. The poem goes so far as to suggest that God was tempted to exterminate them altogether. This radical statement comes as a surprise to most who actually understand it, being as it seems to go against all the promises found in various places of the Bible. But there it is, right in verse 26. The poem then meanders into ideas about the other nations, those who would have some part in the fate of the Israelites and their suffering. In the end, it seems these nations would themselves be taken to task over their role in inflicting punishment on the Israelites and the Jews, even though that itself was a result of God's abandoning them. The poem ends on an uncertain note. There is vengeance against those nations, but also a very strong sense of the ultimate power of divine judgment. We are left with the sense that there is no getting around God's omnipotence and that all would be taken into account in the end. Let's get back into the key verses concerning divine justice. These are the fourth and fifth of the poem. They are not all that easy to translate, but the general idea is fairly clear. They may be rendered like this, quote, "The rock is perfect in his actions, for all his ways are just. A trustworthy God who has no evil, who is righteous and honest. He is not corrupt. His children have become blemished. It is a generation which is crooked and twisted." There it is, about as simple as it could be presented. Again, there are many different translations of these two verses. In particular, the second verse has many interpretations, some of which are at great odds with others. It is unclear if the reading is that there is no corruption in God, or if it is saying that the corruption lies with God's blemished children. But the basic idea of divine justice is there in full color. It is stated as a simple fact, like an arithmetic expression. There is no debating this point in this poem. It is meant to be accepted and dealt with. The problem with all this, of course, is that it doesn't seem to be the way things actually are. Is it really so that all of God's ways are just? Aren't every one of us, either individually or collectively, subject to all kinds of injustice that could have easily been made right by a simple flick of God's divine wand? This is such a glaring question that it hardly needs to be stated. But there is no room here for an answer or even to ask the question. What are we to do with this? Are we supposed to meekly accept this as a statement of fact and swallow our sense of injustice? Are we really expected to believe this even if we don't really believe it? How are we to go about living our lives as believers or whatever if we cannot truly buy into this? There is no answer to any of these questions. Perhaps this is why the poem states this idea so matter-of-factly. It simply is the way things are. Any debate on the matter merely muddies the waters and makes things even more confusing. This is the way it is. God is just, and that's that. Whatever problems we may find with that are our own doing. We have corrupted our beliefs and our thinking and have projected all kinds of false expectations into our minds. We come to the table of life with our own understandings of the way things should be and cannot possibly fathom or accept that they aren't that way. It is like looking in the mirror and expecting to see one image, but what is there is something else entirely. Whose fault is that? If we didn't have that false expectation to begin with, we wouldn't be all that surprised at what we see. The answer to all those questions about divine justice is not found in this poem. The poem only lays out the idea in all its glory. We have to deal with it and as we go about our lives. Some will have no problem with it, accepting it for what it is and taking the good with the bad with equal equanimity. Others will reject it altogether as one more antiquated notion from the Bible. Most will be somewhere in between, feeling that there should be some sort of system of divine justice, but wondering now and again why it doesn't seem to work consistently. We all fit in there somewhere, and it is up to us to fit this into our intellectual and emotional lives. Divine justice is a tough concept for most people. There is so much at stake, and it hits us all so personally that there is almost no way to take an apathetic stance on the question. It would be nice if things were simpler and divine justice was as clear as the weather, but it isn't, and the problem has been left up to us to sort out. This poem may help certain people understand how much is at stake and what the consequences are of struggling against the notion. But at the end of the day, it is the task of each and every one of us to come to terms with how it fits into our lives and live with that. Shabbat Shalom.